Racist cops. Arrest a black man only to face him again as the judge in their own trial. They thought he was just another black man walking out of a supermarket. But less than a year later, he would be the one deciding their fate from the judge's bench. You're watching Black Strength Stories, where prejudice shatters in the face of truth. Like, subscribe, and share if you believe justice knows no color. At 3:42 p.m. on a stifling June afternoon, with the sun scorching every windshield in the dusty lot beside Delmore's Market, Luca Rivers, 32 years old, a part-time lecturer at Boston Community College, stepped out after an interview at the State Human Rights Institute. He wore a crisp white dress shirt and a light gray tie, and carried a paper grocery bag holding just a few essentials: a carton of eggs, 2 bundles of greens, a loaf of bread, and a carton of almond milk. A typical afternoon, an ordinary man. But to some, his skin color turned everything extraordinary. As he opened the door of his faded but spotless 2009 Toyota Camry, Luca didn't even get the chance to sit before 2 patrol cars. Plates 457KX and 312BD screeched to a halt, cutting off the front of his vehicle like he'd just robbed a bank. Their doors flung open. 2 officers stepped out. Oliver Keller, white, about 40, tall with narrow eyes, and Otis Daly, of Irish descent, shorter, broad-shouldered, with a hunched posture and a sneer he didn't bother to hide. No badge, no greeting, no courtesy. Oliver walked up and tapped the driver's window with his bony knuckles, his eyes cold as steel, and said in a flat voice, "License and registration?" Luca, still standing outside, looked mildly confused, but stayed composed. He nodded and replied clearly, "Yes, it's in the glove compartment. I'll just—" Before he could reach for it, Otis barked, "Do not move." Then, without hesitation, he slammed his baton into the passenger side window, cracking a corner that shattered into splinters. The entire parking lot went silent. A woman turned her head, startled. A young man pulled out his phone and began filming. Luca, heart pounding but face calm, raised both hands onto the steering wheel like a student rehearsing a textbook traffic stop. He spoke clearly, slowly. "I just came to buy groceries. I'm a lecturer. I haven't done anything illegal." But before he could finish, Oliver yanked open the driver's side door, grabbed Luca's wrist, and dragged him from the car like a fleeing suspect. No commands, no search warrant, no one intervened. Right there, in front of 7 bystanders live streaming on Facebook and TikTok, videos that would later go viral, Luca was slammed face down onto the scorching hood under the unrelenting June sun. His elbows were pinned, his cheek pressed against hot metal that singed his skin, leaving a red burn that would last 3 days. He didn't fight back, didn't scream, didn't shout. "I have rights," like people often do in viral clips. There were only his eyes, expressionless, hollow, as if looking straight through the 2 officers tormenting him. Eyes that, in their stillness, drove them mad. Otis clenched his jaw. "Not gonna scream? I thought you people were always the loud ones," Oliver growled, pressing harder. "Acting all calm? Must be hiding something in the car." Their panic wasn't about Luca. It was about what his calmness represented. They had no idea that the man they humiliated today would be the one to issue their sentence in a courtroom just years later. After the violent yank that nearly dislocated his joint, Luca almost collapsed. A sharp pain shot from his left shoulder down through his forearm, piercing his palm, which was still pressed hard against the hood. A faint crack sounded, the unmistakable pop of a dislocated shoulder. He didn't scream, but tears welled up, not from weakness, but from pain so deep and suffocating it had no way out. Otis wrenched both of his arms behind him like tying up an animal. The metal cuffs slammed against his wrists with unnecessary force, immediately leaving a bruise. Later, measured at 11.2 centimeters long and 3 centimeters wide, according to forensic documentation. Meanwhile, Oliver acted like he was still hunting prey. He leaned over Luca's back, spat directly onto his white dress shirt, then ground the heel of his polished Bates tactical boot into Luca's right wrist, which was angled awkwardly on the hood. The pressure was slow, deliberate, as if he wanted to crush every bone, one by one, without anyone but the victim feeling it. Not gonna scream? Not gonna beg? Otis leaned in close to Luca's ear, his voice hissing like venom. You people usually scream, but you're stone silent. I hate that. I hate that stone silent shit. They didn't understand. It was Luca's silence that screamed the loudest. As a final insult, Otis grabbed the grocery bag Luca had just purchased. He flung the items one by one onto the asphalt. Eggs shattered, whites spilling like blood across the pavement. The loaf of bread crushed under his boot. The herbs were tossed onto the street like weeds. Everything was reduced to garbage in their eyes. A woman named Clarissa Vang, live streaming from her third-floor balcony overlooking the lot, managed to capture 43 seconds of video before Otis spotted her and barked, "Get the hell out of here. You want to get arrested for obstruction?" Her hands trembled as she ended the stream, but she saved the clip. That short video would later rack up over 4.6 million views on TikTok in just 24 hours, igniting a national wave of outrage. There was no warrant for the search, no independent police monitor. No one mentioned Miranda rights. Otis shoved his hand into Luca's back pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet. Inside was a temporary faculty ID from Boston Community College, a photo of his mother, and a tuition receipt for a course titled Law and Human Rights Policy. Oliver glanced at the wallet, then hurled it into the storm drain without a second thought. Luca was shoved into the back seat of the patrol car. The door slammed shut with a dry clack. No charges were filed. No rights were read. On paper, he didn't exist. On the drive to Norchester City Police Station, Otis lit a Marlboro and muttered through the rearview mirror, "He's obedient. I'll just put him down as hostile attitude." Oliver burst out laughing. "Perfect. Just enough to keep him from suing. These people don't study law, do they?" In the back seat, Luca pressed his forehead to the sweltering glass. Not out of fear, not out of rage, but because he understood. Once a system denies you your humanity, it can crush you, quietly, without a bang. 8 hours and 17 minutes. That was how long Luca was held in the Norchester police station holding cell. No charges, no indictment, no search warrant, and not once were his Miranda rights read. No one asked for his full name. No one allowed him a phone call. There was only a flickering fluorescent light, the stench of bleach, and a yellow-stained wall with the scrawled phrase, "Freedom is a myth." At exactly 11:59 p.m., a young officer walked in and tossed him a paper bag containing a few scattered belongings. His car keys, a pair of shoes missing their laces, and the crumpled receipt from his grocery run. Let's just say nothing happened. A quiet, shameless, invisible verdict. But Luca didn't forget. From the very moment he stepped through that iron door, he made a vow to himself that his story would not be buried in silence. He returned to the small second-floor apartment in Dorchester, the home that once belonged to his parents. His father, William Rivers, an immigrant plumber from Trinidad, who died in a worksite accident in 2004, never compensated because he lacked documentation to prove legal employment. Luca opened the wooden cabinet and took out a worn, dark brown leather notebook, wrapped in a cotton cloth sewn from his mother's old blouse, still stained faintly with engine oil, the only keepsake his father left behind. On the first page, with a shaky black pen, he wrote, "I was not recognized as a victim, but I will become the one who judges." From that day forward, the journey began. By day, Luca spent countless hours at the public library. He sat near the second-floor window, where the angled light was just enough to read without wasting electricity. On his table, a copy of the U.S. Constitution, 1992 Revised Edition, a blue ballpoint pen, and a cheap $1.15 Arctic Brew coffee from the vending machine. He took notes on every clause, cross-checked case law, and underlined every loophole in the current legal code. Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act, Graham v. Connor, 1989, Tennessee v. Garner, 1985. By night, Luca worked as a night shift security guard at the city's southern container port, a job that paid $11.50 an hour, offered no benefits, but gave him time to read when no ships were docking. When his scholarship application was rejected due to prior detainment flagged in system records, Luca quietly opened his notebook and underlined one red word beneath money. Don't need money, need knowledge. He sold his mother's white gold wedding ring, her 30th anniversary keepsake, for $286. Then his old Toshiba 2006 laptop from college, another $70. And the second-hand TV he'd bought from a friend for $35. With nearly $400, he enrolled in a foundational law course at the Boston Legal Prep Institute, a part-time evening program. In class, Luca was the only one without a laptop, just a thick notebook and a box of No. 2 pencils. He was also the only black student, the oldest student, and the only one who studied with the look of a man whose life depended on every line of law. During a break, a second-year law student named Clara asked him, "Where are you planning to apply?" Luca replied, "I'm not studying to become a lawyer. I'm studying to rebuild the system that once tried to erase me." After that incident, for 3 years, Luca quietly entered the world of law like a ghost with perfect memory. He didn't make noise, didn't appear at student union events, didn't post graduation photos. But the name Luca Rivers topped every grade report in the night class program at the Massachusetts Institute for Law, Constitution and Creativity, MLCC. Instead of gathering at bars after class, Luca spent his evenings on the 6th floor of the library, a place few visited due to dim lighting and freezing drafts. He always sat at the far left table, table 112, near the shelf of federal case law, where he sketched the faces of Oliver and Otis over and over again, the way their eyes narrowed in anger, the razor-sharp crease lines of their uniforms, even the precise brand and model of the shoes Oliver had used to grind into his wrist. Bates Tactical GX8, size 10.5. Not a single day passed without him recalling the heat of the car hood, the crack of his shoulder joint, Otis's crooked smirk, or the scent of Marlboro smoke, mingled with the taste of blood from his own bitten lip. Those details, for Luca, weren't fuel for hatred. They were living evidence. That old brown leather notebook had now swelled to 4 times its original thickness. It no longer contained just legal doctrines, but over 300 handwritten pages detailing misconduct patterns, related cases, and even hand-drawn diagrams of the scene from that day. Every movement, every position, every spoken word. In a personal folder on his old laptop titled Ghost Evidence, Luca archived 17 similar cases that had occurred in Dorchester County from 2013 to 2019. They shared striking patterns. The arrested were Black or Latinx, no solid evidence, no Miranda rights were read, incident reports were rewritten to be unfavorable, and ultimately, no prosecution or resolved internally. One winter night in his 4th year, through chance access to the city's internal bug reporting system, Luca uncovered a leaked internal email exchange between Oliver and the then station commander, Lieutenant Blake Rainman. The subject line read, "Containment Protocol," a term not found in any official legal documentation. One chilling line in the email stood out, Hit and forget. Don't let them think screaming gives them power. Luca printed it, laminated it, and placed it on the first page of his judicial application file. While his classmates revised notes in study groups, Luca recorded lectures and listened to them 3 times a night during his security shifts. While others applied for internships at law firms, he submitted his request to work as an unpaid intern at the State Appellate Court's Civil Rights Division, putting in over 400 hours without a single day off. In his 6th year, after completing a federal law specialization program, he stunned the legal community by beating out 148 other candidates and being appointed by the state governor as a federal judge for the Boston District, becoming the youngest black judge in Massachusetts history to hold the position at age 38. The press was shaken. Media outlets were blindsided. Local news stations ran headlines like, "From Victim to Guardian of Justice, the unbreakable journey of Luca Rivers." But Luca never appeared. No press conference, no speech. Only one line was ever posted on his official profile, quoted from his old notebook. "Justice doesn't need to be shouted. It needs to be carried out, precisely, quietly, and without compromise." One early autumn morning, the 9th District Federal Court received a case that made the entire Judiciary Office pause for a second read. Details: 2 former Norchester City police officers accused of assaulting a 15-year-old high school student in the school parking lot. Incident recorded on both body cam and students' phone footage. The victim was left unconscious. Emergency summons approved by the federal prosecutor. Name of the accused: Oliver Keller. Otis Daly. Luca Rivers sat alone in his 3rd-floor office, sunlight filtering through the glare-reducing glass, casting a glow on the oak-framed judge's certificate hanging behind him. In his hands was a neatly clipped case file, but the sight of those 2 names made his heart stop for 1 second, then beat again, like a whisper from the past returning. The first hearing was scheduled in Courtroom 3 on October 14th, 9 a.m. The courtroom was packed. Reporters swarmed outside. On social media, the hashtag number #JusticeForTaryn, the name of the assaulted boy, was trending in the state's top 3. Oliver and Otis entered wearing charcoal suits and deep purple ties. Their faces are smug. Neither recognized the black man in the black robe seated at the center of the bench, holding the gavel. Luca didn't need an introduction, didn't need to say, "I'm the one you once arrested, crushed, and assumed had vanished." He simply struck the gavel once, a sharp, thunderous knock echoing off the soundproofed wooden walls like a cold warning. In his hands was a 136-page case file, including 6 video clips, 2 eyewitness statements, and a medical report detailing minor traumatic brain injury, soft tissue damage, and a Level 2 psychological trauma diagnosis. Excerpt from the incident report. The victim was shoved, pinned down, then punched 3 times in the face. While unconscious, he was kicked in the chest, all captured on body cam. Oliver leaned toward his attorney and whispered, "Probably some kid we arrested years ago. Now thinks he's big stuff 'cause he wears a robe." Otis sneered, glancing at Luca. "Looks familiar. But hell, don't all black guys look the same?" Luca did not react. No glance in return. He let the silence in the courtroom speak louder than any outburst. Then the first video began to play. The room fell silent. Every heartbeat slowed. Every eye is fixed on the screen. Otis, the one always grinning, blinked hard when footage of himself yelling, pinning the boy down on the pavement like an animal, filled the screen. Oliver, sitting beside him, began sweating at the temples, though the room was held steady at 21.2 degrees Celsius. But then, a strange detail emerged. When Otis gave a signal to Oliver, 3 fingers curled inward, palm facing in. It was a gesture not found in any police training manual. To anyone else, it might seem meaningless. But to Luca, it was the same signal Oliver had used 9 years earlier, At the exact moment he crushed Luca's wrist under his boot. The entire courtroom froze. Memories that were never recorded in reports now replayed vividly on screen, undeniable and raw. Still, Luca said nothing. No smile, no leaning forward. But when his eyes finally locked on Otis's pale, lifeless face, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. He knew. Oliver knew. Both of them finally recognized that the man behind the judge's bench was no longer the weak black guy from their past. He was the very man they once tried to erase from the system, and who now commanded it. Day 2 of the trial. Outside, protesters raised signs reading, "Justice for Taryn" and "No more silence." Inside, the atmosphere was thick, like a storm about to break. Everyone awaited the next testimony, but no one expected the man who walked in. Edward Malley, a former officer who had patrolled alongside Oliver Keller and Otis daily for 6 years. Malley entered the courtroom in a faded gray-blue uniform, old medals glinting under the courthouse lights. But the brightest thing on him wasn't fabric or metal. It was the unmistakable look of remorse in his eyes. "How long did you work with them?" the prosecutor asked. 6 years, from 2011 to 2017. "Bravo 3 team," he replied, voice deep, steady, as if he'd waited his whole life for this moment. And then he said, "I once heard Oliver say clearly, 'You want to get promoted? Don't just write tickets. Learn how to hit. But hit the right people. Black, immigrant, homeless. The kind no one believes.'" The courtroom felt as if struck by a bolt of electricity. A few gasped audibly. Oliver snarled, "He's making it up," and turned to his lawyer, slamming a fist on the table. But his panicked eyes, no longer in control, spoke louder than his outburst. Malley held up an old, crumpled department memo, worn but the ink still intact. In the margin, next to a patrol shift time, was a handwritten note. Zone 4B, no report needed if trash cleared. The attorney asked, "What do you understand that to mean?" He answered flatly, "It means if you handled someone in Zone 4B, where immigrants live packed in, you didn't need a report. Because, as Oliver put it, they got no one to sue." Otis turned to Oliver and exhaled sharply, face pale. For the first time since the trial began, the once inseparable arrest partners started to crack like concrete struck at its weakest point. Malley continued, voice catching. "I once turned on my body cam, then turned it off. I once held reports, and then pretended to file them. I saw the punches, the kicks, and I stayed silent. But that day, when Taryn was lying unconscious and bleeding on the pavement, I saw my nephew in that boy's eyes." He pulled from his pocket a handwritten letter from Taryn, written at the hospital and addressed to "the man in the blue shirt who looked at me but didn't speak." The letter read, "I don't blame you. But if you speak up, maybe no one else will have to be like me." The courtroom fell into a sacred silence, the kind that arrives when a person is forced to face their conscience. Luca sat high on the bench, the light catching the rim of his glasses. No smile, no words, but his eyes, deep, still, and steady as carved stone, made it clear that not one person in that room dared twist a single word. Otis bowed his head. Oliver, though still upright, clawed at the edge of the table, as if grasping for the last remnants of a decaying power, slipping away with every second. When the prosecutor asked, "Why are you speaking now?" Malley lifted his gaze toward Luca and said, "Because when I saw the judge walk in, I realized, if someone I once denied with my silence can become a symbol of justice, then I, even late, can still choose to stand on the right side." A reporter from USA Law and Order remarked, "I've covered many major trials, but I've never seen a judge maintain such composure in a retaliation so silent, yet so powerful." Luca entered the courtroom as usual. No change of robe, no new tie. Still the same black judicial gown, gavel in hand. But today, his eyes no longer held just the gaze of a judge. They carried the weight of a man once broken, now piecing the truth back together. Order the full footage from the body cams of both defendants to be played. No edits, no cuts, no blurring. Luca's command made the defense attorney go pale. The videos were already reviewed in full during the department's internal proceedings, the lawyer responded. Luca nodded, then opened file folder number 14 labeled, Recovered Fragment. Do not alter. A 43-second video, once flagged as corrupted in the system, had now been fully restored by tracing it back through the department's auxiliary digital server. Final access signature? Oliver Keller. Date, 3 weeks after the assault on Terrain. The footage began. Taryn, 15 years old, lay flat on the pavement, unconscious. No resistance. Otis approached, pressed his boot hard on the left side of the boy's skull, and clearly said, "Don't make me dirty my shoes because of you." A sound rang out. Crack. No soundtrack, no effect. Just the raw, unfiltered sound of bones, breaking and humanity shattering. The courtroom froze. A woman in the back row stifled sobs behind her hand. A man bowed his head into the seat in front of him. The video continued. Oliver, standing about 2 meters away, turned to face the camera, then walked over and stomped on Taryn's chest again. Not in anger, not in panic, just out of habit, like a ritual. Luca stood. He didn't roar. He didn't point. He only said one sentence, slowly, clearly. You weren't afraid because no one saw. Now, someone has. Otis lowered his head. Oliver closed his eyes. Behind them, a server technician confirmed. The video had been manually deleted using a personal password with a digital signature matching Oliver Keller's account. An indisputable piece of evidence. Luca returned to the bench. The room braced for fury, but he didn't yell. There was no need to perform. He simply tapped the gavel lightly on the desk. Thud. A single sound. Nothing more. No repetition. Proceed. Silence enveloped the jury. Not a silence of doubt, but of a truth so absolute that any defense now seemed futile. In the hallway, a reporter whispered to his cameraman, "This isn't a trial anymore. This is the rise of memories once trampled." As Luca exited the courtroom, sunlight pierced through the slightly cracked glass behind him, just like the car window Otis had shattered all those years ago. 4th day of the trial. A stifling atmosphere blanketed the courtroom, even with the air conditioning running at full capacity. It wasn't the heat. It was the pressure, and the walls of silence cracking with each visible fracture. When asked to comment on the video just shown, Otis Daly, the former police officer, unexpectedly stood and requested to speak outside the scope of his official testimony. Everyone was stunned. Oliver turned to look at him, eyes narrowed with suspicion, while the defense attorney shook his head subtly, as if to warn, "Don't be foolish." But Otis didn't stop. I deleted that video. Oliver told me. No one's gonna believe it. He's just some black kid. They'll think he's lying. The words dropped into the courtroom like a slab of concrete. Every juror turned to Oliver, who now clenched his jaw so tightly his face had gone pale. Otis's hands trembled as he pulled from his inner pocket a folded note, old paper, ink smudged, but still legible. The handwritten line read, Case TRN-08, suppression. No file, no report, no audio. Luca nodded as if he had been waiting for this moment for 9 years. Otis continued, voice growing quieter but sharp as a blade. We called those cases suppressions, meaning beat them down, then ignore it. No report. No record entered. I knew it was wrong. I knew every time I stayed silent, I was pushing someone like Taryn deeper into a hole. But I was scared. I thought I was protected. Luca opened another file. This one brown stamped, confidential, unprocessed complaints. Inside, 17 incidents from the same district over 8 years, none of them officially recorded in the internal system. Dates, times, locations, brief descriptions, no images, no formal reports. But Luca had pieced together each one from hospital logs, independent witnesses, and leaked internal emails. "I don't need to strip you of your medals," Luca said, not with anger, but with a chilling disappointment. "I need you to understand this. Silence is no longer a shield. It's the shadow that devours everything decent in this system." Otis sat down and buried his head in his hands. A man who once beat his chest with pride at being a frontline hero, now sobbing, soundless. No one comforted him. No one intervened. Oliver, beside him, remained silent. But his eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of someone in control. They were the eyes of a man who knew he was about to be exposed, not by an enemy, but by the very person who once protected him. There was no unity left. No more us. Two men who had once stood on the same line of duty now sat chained to the same bench, but fleeing in opposite directions. And Luca, still seated, silent, without raising his voice, without flinging files onto the desk, without theatrics. It was his calm that commanded the room to listen. "The court will resume tomorrow morning. I hope, by then, those who still want to tell the truth won't wait until it's too late." No one in the courtroom could have predicted Judge Luca Rivers' final move on that fateful Friday morning. He didn't call another witness. He didn't play another video. There was only one thing. A photo. Simple. Unembellished. No effects are needed. The photo appeared on the large screen in the center of the courtroom. A swollen face, dried blood streaked along both cheekbones, eyes puffed nearly shut. The entire courtroom held its breath. Jurors flinched. Several people covered their mouths. No caption, no date, no location. Otis closed his eyes. Oliver leaned back into his chair and whispered, "No, it can't be." But Luca didn't need to say more. He stood, pointed at the image, and then stared directly at the two men who had beaten him to that state 9 years ago. If your memory chooses to forget, let me help you remember. That photo wasn't legal evidence. It was the evidence of memory, of a man once crushed by the system, discarded like garbage, who rose, walked back into that very system, not to destroy it, but to expose it. The courtroom remained silent. Luca didn't read a verdict. He simply placed his hand on the bench, voice low but each word distinct. "I am not a victim. I am the living memory of what you once denied." Otis buried his head in his hands, tears soaking the wrinkled stack of papers before him. Oliver, now silent, had nothing left to say. His arrogance had evaporated like steam beneath the midday sun. An elderly attorney in the room whispered to his assistant, "In 35 years, this is the first time I've seen a judge deliver no sentence. And yet, make the entire system reflect on itself." No one objected. No rebuttal was made. Only one thing remained: the truth, quietly acknowledged in the eyes of those who once believed they stood above the law. The court recessed for lunch, but no one moved. Everyone sat still, as if they had just witnessed a verdict that needed no announcement, yet carried unmistakable weight. Luca stepped outside in silence. He didn't look back. But behind him, what lingered wasn't fear or regret. It was the rare moment when the justice system admitted it had once been wrong. The entire Montara courthouse stood still. One single photo, his face from back then, was now circulating across social media, amassing over 3.2 million shares within 18 hours. That afternoon, at 4:13 p.m., Luca stepped out from the heavy wooden doors of the federal courthouse of District 9. He didn't take the honorary exit, nor was he accompanied by any security escort. Instead, he chose the narrow path along the wall, down the gray stone steps where a crowd, over 200 people, was waiting in silence. No signs held up, just quiet anticipation. News cameras screeched into focus, microphones raised high, lights flashing like a thunderstorm. But Luca didn't speak right away. He lifted his hand slowly, palm facing the people, a gesture that asked for silence, not by power, but by presence. From his bag, he pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper, yellowed with time. One corner still bore a coffee stain and a faint trace of blood. He raised it high. This is a copy of the arrest warrant from years ago. No name, no occupation, no explanation. Just 3 lines. Male. Black. Non-compliant. No one laughed. No one spoke. Only hundreds of eyes. Lowering in shame. Luca looked up, his voice echoing across Montera Square like thunder on a cloudless day. I once wore a white shirt and was treated like a suspect. I wore a judge's robe and was accused of bias. So what should I wear? To simply be seen as human? Within the next 12 hours, that question was quoted over 4.2 million times on X, 1.7 million times on TikTok, and headlined by 56 major news outlets from The Washington Post and BBC to The Guardian. The verdict was announced the following morning. Oliver Keller, stripped of all medals from his 17 years of service, additionally charged with evidence tampering. Otis Daly, permanently dismissed from the force, his records filed under systemic abuse of authority. Luca declined to make any victory speech. He held no press conference. He didn't write a book. He left behind only one sentence in a letter to the court's office. I don't need recognition. I need this system to stop forgetting the pain of those who were stepped on just for being different. That same afternoon, after the crowd had dispersed, a little girl, no older than 7, quietly drew on the courthouse steps with white chalk, a scale of justice tilted toward a man in a judge's robe. Luca saw her. He said nothing. But in his eyes, there was a calmness no one had seen in him for over a decade. He turned away, back straight, walking with the same firm steps as the day Otis and Oliver first dragged him out of his car. But this time, his hands weren't tied, his mouth wasn't silenced, and he was no longer invisible. Something had finally begun to shift. Join us in sharing meaningful stories by hitting the like button and subscribing. Don't forget to turn on notifications to start your day with powerful lessons and heartfelt empathy.